surviving the apocalypse?
I think so. You? From afar. Here's a Graham gift, by the way.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, it's yeah, we decided we were gonna be good local citizens, and so Monday I said to the ladies, I said to Bree, I said, you know, let's order from one of these restaurants that, you know, normally doesn't do takeout. Let's get some, you know, we'll buy in, they, you know, they'll deliver whatever. She goes, well, where do you want to order from? I said, you girls pick. And they were like, well, let's get Mexican. I'm like, that's fine. Those guys, no problem. Get fajitas, whatever. And we order a spread. And I ate it. I thought it was fine. I got home. I had an apple because I wasn't really feeling great. I didn't even eat dinner. I had an apple with some peanut butter, and I was like, all right. I was like, went to bed, 2 a.m. I was like, oh. I got up, ran to the
Cold
bathroom.
sweats?
Ran to the bathroom. It was not pretty. And then I crunched some Tums, and about 20 minutes later, I thought.
popped up live on mine.
All right. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome to the Joe and Doug podcast, episode 4. We're going to talk about the coronavirus.
Yes, let's do
so
this.
we're going to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but we want to take a different spin on it. And so before we get into our different spin, let me just say to you, first and foremost, we understand, A, that this is serious. Hundreds of thousands of people globally have been sick. Yes, thousands of people have died. And unfortunately, due to all projections, more people will get sick and more people will die. So we don't want to make light of this. We understand that there are some families that are forever changed. There are some people that have had to go into quarantine and have had atrocious experiences with this. And so we don't want to make light of this, but we also want to help everybody understand how you approach this, the perspective you choose to take, and the way that you kind of approach this season. You can approach it with fear and gloom and doom, or you can approach it with some positivity, optimism, and seeing the silver lining in all of this. So, Joe, let's talk about it. How do you approach the coronavirus? This kind of everything's locked down. You can't wipe your butt anymore. There's no water. How do you navigate this season and not fall into the fear and the gloom and doom, and begin to see opportunity and positivity around every corner?
Well, I'm an optimist, so it's really, I try super hard to take everything and figure out a way to make it so that, there's either a benefit or there's a learning experience or there's something to get out of it, or else it's wasted. I mean,
Exactly.
You're not changing this thing, right? It's happening regardless of how you feel about it. And so if you just decide that, when you watch the news, if that's your influence, you're going to feel really crappy at the end of it, because all they're going to do is fill your head with stuff that you should be worried about. And so, but if you just take a step back and say, okay, the trajectory is already known. We know what's going to happen. They're going to work hard to make it spread out longer period of time, but with less intensity. And you get to sit at home and spend a ton of time that you would normally not have. So then you just start assembling, piece pieces together and what it's going to be like, and try to make the absolute best of it. Whether it be, just new philosophies, just I'm going to, you get a reset button, and you don't always get a reset button in life.
People talk about a reset button,
Yes.
but very few hit the button.
This is a forced one, right?
Yeah.
So, when I get a reset button in business, and we get a couple of years. So when we go into a holiday, before we kind of wrap up projects, and then we go enjoy the holiday, and when we come back, it's like all new. It's like the landscape is fresh, and there isn't anything in there. You get to create everything every time. Some people, that's a scary endeavor, because change is really a suffocating thing sometimes. But if you go into it knowing that you get to have new stuff on the other side of this, you could really make some cool stuff in your life.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, so many folks are dealing with the uncertainty. They're dealing with job loss. All kinds of industries right now are laying people off. And there's a real tendency in this moment to just be like, well, I'm screwed, and just throw your hands up. If it came right now and Joe Danier lost everything, what does Joe do? How do you're laid off, your company's not making money. What do you do, and how do you collect yourself? Because for some people, that's so crushing, so devastating. Even if, for them, it was what paid the bills. It was what brought them a sense of value and identity. How do you navigate, man, I just lost my job. I don't know for how long or if I'll ever be hired back. How do you overcome, A, the mental side, and then B, maybe what are some practical things that a person in that situation could do?
Well, if you kind of take what's happening now, let's just say you didn't plan. You don't have a bunch of money sitting around, and you don't have a bunch of contingencies for this exact situation. You're going to have to really get close to people who are in that state of mind. So if you've got friends or influential people in your congregation or whatever, team up with them, and the next go around, because this isn't going to be the last one in your lifetime. This is like only one of the rest, right?
Yeah.
And so if you were to go back in time, what you would have done different. Like, you would have had a contingency. If I die tomorrow, right? What happens? Well, I told my wife already, here's what you do. Do this, this, this. Now, I'm not hoping for death.
Right,
But if it should happen, everybody I know knows exactly what to do. And it takes the intensity out of it. So if you lose your job, okay, what do you do? So let's just say your company goes bust and they don't come back from this. Well, what do you do? Well, did you get a job the first time? Start thinking about where you were at when you started getting excited about the prospects of working somewhere. start working on that now. So if you need a new skill, hey, you've got 3 weeks ahead of you to learn something new and get in a whole different industry.
Yeah.
You might come back to your old job that comes back and say, I got 5 more skills here. How about a little bit of, you know?
No, that's good. Yeah, I think no time taken to sharpen your tools is ever wasted, is the adage. So yeah, you certainly could do that. But talk a little about the mental side of things, because I know several folks now that have lost their jobs and they didn't have a contingency, or they don't have extra money just sitting around to do that, and so things are going to be tight. How do you navigate that? What do you cut? What do you keep on a real practical level? What things do you pay? Do you not pay? How do you maybe have that conversation with your family or with your spouse? Like, hey, I know for me as a guy, I feel, and this may seem a little archaic for some folks, but I feel it's my responsibility to provide for my family.
For sure.
And I get a great sense of value that, I'm a man, I make money, and I'm, quote unquote, the king of the castle. To me, I draw a great deal of purpose and value from that. I want my kids to feel protected, my wife to feel protected. And when I can't provide that anymore, I would have to go through some mental gymnastics, if you will, to get myself in a place where I can go, all right, we can climb out of this.
All right. Well, this is of no doing of your own. You did not make
Right.
a mistake. You didn't bring this on. You were at the same spot with millions of other people.
Right.
So I want you to look at what happens next as just this universal pause where when we start again, we're all going to be on the same page. So there's going to be some forgiveness. There's going to be some grace. Here's the thing. You don't want to get to the point where you're embarrassed and then start doing the wrong things. You want to you talk to your spouse and tell them exactly what you know is going to happen. If there's fears, you lay them out now before they even happen. So if you think you're not going to be able to pay your bank, go call your bank. You know how many banks have just said, thanks for calling and see you next month, right?
Yeah.
And if you do the right thing, you will see this stuff start to spawn, and you'll feel a bit more confident about, it feels like you're in a bad spot, but so is everybody else. So if everybody's in the same spot, we can all get together and make each other feel good about it.
That's good. So for that person that's maybe been sitting on a business idea, you're an entrepreneur and you love getting into that space, you love helping businesses out. So if somebody's been sitting on this business idea and they got some extra time now, they're being forced to be at home. What are 3 or 4 things they could start doing today so that whenever this lifts, 3 weeks from now, 10 weeks from now, whatever, life goes back to normal and they're ready now with this business proposal, business plan, or they're ready to launch in and start selling product, whatever it might be. What are a few things that maybe they could do now? Maybe they are laid off and they could put 100% of their time into it. What exactly would be the first 3 things you would do if you were going to launch a business at the end of this time?
So this is magic time where you still have access to every resource that's there. Nothing is dried up, so all of those raw materials are available to you, and you're not fighting for them anymore. Nobody's opening a business at that point, right? So really, you can go get your stuff, and you can probably get it on sale, right? And second, you have time to experiment and try to go through and see if you have the chops for it, if you have the skill set for it, and figure that out. And again, usually life happens where you have a good idea and you have about 30 seconds to play with it before you got to go back to work.
Yeah.
You got 3 weeks to go through this sucker.
Yeah.
So by the end of the 3 weeks, you'll have full exposure to people who otherwise, you can go ask your wife every 10 minutes if it looks good or you did a good job, because she's got nothing to do either. So the time is going to be your biggest friend here, and the availability of people to really help you on it, because like I said, they got nothing else going on.
That's good. How would you go about? Let's just hypothetically, right? Should a person who's looking to maybe launch a business idea, should they go into the experimental phase, the testing phase, or should they start pumping advertisement out? What would be your first play during these 3 weeks? How would you market in this environment, I guess, is more my question.
So the thing is that usually you'll have about 20 bad ideas before you have your good one. So if you're going to use this time to go through a bunch of them, don't fall in love with any one of them. Once you do something that maybe you did as a hobby, as soon as you get into where I need to make money, you might not like it as much as you did when it had to be a grind kind of a thing.
Yep.
So go through a bunch of them, like have maybe your top 5 lined up and do a little bit of here, a little bit of here, and find one that you could say, yeah, that's it. That's the one that I need to be putting my time into. And then you can spend, the remaining time really ferreting it out and see, because competency is a big part of it, but that's not everything. Right? Just because, if you're a terrible singer, but you could really see yourself on stage, well, what should you do? Should you practice the mechanics of singing? Or you could see if you want to do it every day of your life, that kind of a thing.
That's good. Maybe what, let's throw a free bone out here to
Yes.
everybody watching. What would be a business that you think would be worthwhile for somebody to start? What's an idea, something maybe that's even been rattling around in your brain, you haven't done it yet, and maybe somebody's going to listen and go, you know what, I could pull that off in these next 3 weeks. What would be something that we could, a little bone we could throw somebody who's watching is going, I don't even know what to do.
I'm considering, like, we do a lot of stuff just because we've always done it. And when stuff like this happens, you get to consider, what if that wasn't a thing and we had to invent it today? Like, if we all get together and we have all the electronics that we have right now and say, we're going to vote for president, what would be the best way? Let's all go and put paper things in boxes, right? We would never say that. Right. Like, oh, I've got email. Let's do that. And that's where we'd start. So one of my, finding a secure way of doing voting that makes it so that there's no fraud, right? Somebody could really be working on that, and, you know, you've got the people there that can try all this out, and you got an election, you know.
Yeah.
I'm halfway tempted to do it now, you know what I mean, since we're talking about it. But it presents a whole lot of things when you get people that can't travel anymore. And, you know, think of like what Grubhub and Uber Eats and those delivery services are going to do. I mean, those industries were in their infancy, and they're going to thrive. They're going to explode just because of this different demand that's come to the market. It changes us forever now.
Yeah. So you mentioned there, you know, kind of our hand being forced to innovate.
Yes.
So from the church side of things, in the church world, everybody is having to go on to an online format. If they didn't do it last week, they're all doing it this week. Some churches have been doing it for a while. Our church has been doing it for about a year now. Some churches have been doing it for a long time. And some have access to gajillions of dollars of professional equipment. I've had conversations with 3 pastors in the last 24 to 36 hours. What do I need to buy? What do I need to do? And I'm like, I don't know, talk to Joe. But truthfully, everybody's in a scramble right now because we've all said for the last decade, we need to be online more. We need to put out more content. Every pastor I've talked to, myself included, I need to be doing more videos. I need to be doing more devotionals online. Like our job is the message. And we all kind of like, well, yeah, because it's always there, and you could do it, and you do it from here, and you do it there, and it's okay. But man, this shift is going to force every pastor to have to do this.
Well,
it's going to
just
force
like we were
every
talking
church.
about, could you see giving your messages out in this format, even though it's different than what everybody else is doing? Could you see it doing it every day? It's scary, isn't it?
It's a the two-pronged side of church is, yes, it's about the message, but it's also about the gathering. And so that's the tension I think a lot of people are feeling, particularly in the church world, and is why a lot of people didn't cancel church last weekend. Like, how can we have church and not gather? I mean, literally, the whole idea is coming together like that. We're actually commanded not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. So I get that side of it, but strictly from a message standpoint, there are some people that have been doing it phenomenal online for 10 years now. But if more pastors took seriously this medium, there'd be a lot more content out there.
Right.
And so now they're being forced to, and it's going to be really neat to see what innovations come out of this, what service formats come out of this. I know you and I were even chatting about, like, couldn't we do this every week and have a very geared online, where an interactive style service where we don't even have an audience in, but we design the whole service around this kind of online format to reach a whole different generation,
because
a whole
honestly,
different group of people.
in this state, everything is palatable. Like, if you change the dynamics of how everything's delivered, like, you don't have a choice otherwise. So you got to get the best thing that you can deliver. And so, like, if you can't go to a restaurant, what's the next best thing? Bring it to me, or go through a drive-through, right?
Right.
But the scope of everything changes so drastically that you could, when you're thinking about these things and you're sitting on your couch and you've got nothing to do, the innovations that come out of this are going to be like, okay, well, picture what if viruses happen like seasons, like this is the summer virus and the winter virus, and you go into this lockdown mode regularly. Then what? How's the landscape change?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's not saying that's going to happen, just so you know. Watch him, but it very well could.
Or am I?
I think innovation, talk about innovation process. So some people build that creativity and that creation innovation process into their life. Other people avoid it like the plague.
Yes.
And they just want to live inside their comfort. And I know this, and 1 + 1 is always going to equal 2. And then somebody comes along and says, 2 + 2 = 2 now. And you're like, no. And then they work it out. So talk about, obviously people are being forced into innovation. If you're not comfortable with innovation, innovation. You're not comfortable with this recreation kind of mode. What are some things that maybe people could put into their daily routine now while they have a little bit of extra time so that they start becoming a bit more comfortable with that process?
All right, so there's two ways of going about it. And I'll tell you, most of the time it's harder on innovators because they go about it the harder of the two ways. Okay, so you can go through your inventory of skill sets, find out the things that you can do, and want to do something you can do without really worrying about if people want you to do the thing that you can do. Versus the other way where you look around and look for demand and look for somebody who needs something and then say, oh, I could do that. So if you come up with a really good idea to you that you can do, but nobody in your lifetime has ever asked you to do that thing, it's a hard sell. Like if you had a widget, think about how much education you'd have to have the market in order to see if anybody it would be sellable. But if you could look around and say, lady walking there struggling, hey, I could do that, and you can fill a void, then that's really the easiest way to do that. And that's what's nice about what's going on right now when you're looking around and saying, I'm sitting at the stoplight and there's no cars going in the other direction and I'm still sitting here. I can improve this. Then you're saying the demand is there, not because I can't do anything about stoplights, but I saw that that's probably not the best way of stoplights operating.
Yeah, and it's not the best use of our time either.
Exactly.
Very cool. So on the innovation creative front, I just want to touch on one more thing here, and then we'll spin off, I think, into a couple other things. So when you have, are you the type of guy that breaks something for the sake of trying to fix it in a different way? I know I meet some type of entrepreneurs, and they're like, well, I don't like the way that industry is, or I don't like the way this goes, so I'm just going to destroy this and then build it back and build it better. Obviously not in the sense of maybe a large industry, but even the way your company functions, or the way, sometimes even in a household, this just isn't working. We have to blow everything up and start over. Are you that way, or are you a tinkerer? Like, let me just incrementally try and switch. Let me play with this facet, and okay, that facet actually fixed this problem. Or are you like, hey, let's just level it and start over?
Well, I have developed the ability both. Okay, I think everybody when they're young naturally are destroyers and rebuilders because it's easier that way.
Yeah.
But if you think like most of the challenge, I say one of the hardest things to do in business is to reclaim culture after it's been established. So when you have a culture that's toxic, what do you want to do? Fire everybody and start new, or do you want to weasel your way in there and fix everybody? What do you think's harder, right? Well, the challenge is to fix it because these are human beings. They might be mad at you. They might be punching you in the face. But at the same time, your culture broke them. It wasn't the other way around.
And you're responsible for your culture.
So again, I take it early on, I wasn't as practical or as confident in my ability. So I was a just break it and fix it that way, just because it wasn't laziness. It was just I didn't have the ability. It was just easier. So my wife will tell you early on that if something bothered me, I would literally break it just so that it was gone, and then I could put something in its place. I did that with my porch. I'll tell you a story. So our first starter house, the porch kind of like leaned, and it had it wasn't all that great, and there was big beehives in the house. And just one day I was walking up to the porch and I was mad at it because it was starting to like really start to tilt, and it irritated me. And so just on a whim, I went and grabbed a sledgehammer and I sledged the entire porch. So when my wife pulled into the driveway, I watched her eyes lock on me like, oh, what did you do? So yeah, that's me.
Nice. Nice. You didn't get stung, did you?
No, I didn't. No.
That's awesome. So let's flip gears here because we could spend time continue to talk about that. One more thing on job, business, that sort of stuff. If you've lost your job, if you're looking for work, or you're trying to figure out if you're going to get unemployment, obviously there are those places that you can go for unemployment. But I know, for instance, your company's hiring. Who are you guys looking for? I know you need a couple of spots right now.
We need field staff. Like right now, because everybody's going to change the way they do business. They've got to do a lot of their operations remotely. That calls us in to set up all of these virtual environments where people could still operate, still get business done. Because nobody is really going to pause. We're just going to change the way we were doing things before. And so if if there's a company that's still doing distribution, they might not be able to have staff in the office, but they need people to still pull the gears and levers.
And so it's somebody that would want to apply. Youngstown Computers.
Youngstown Computer. Email me, joe@youngstowncomputer.com, resumes, and I'm going to be, for the next couple of weeks, interviewing a bunch of people.
Awesome. So if you're interested, it'd be
sure.
a good spot to work. Let's talk finances, right? The stock market is and it's probably going to continue to go. I know, talked to some of my family members and stuff, and they're all watching their 401ks and everything else. And it's really sucks for some people that are close to, that retirement age or in the midst of it. But if you're, I'm 35, as they say, just ride it and it'll come back. What's kind of maybe some of your philosophy with the stock market right now? Investing, should people buy? Should they wait? Should they refinance their house?
Can I step one back on that?
Yeah.
Because I think a majority of people, especially when things are good for a long period of time, you sort of take conditions for granted and you leverage yourself a little bit more. And when you get stuck in a position like this where the money is like totally tight, the investing in, like, the big question right now is, what do I do about my bills? Like, who am I paying when the next dollar comes through? Because what's going to happen is when people get afraid, they have a tendency to not do anything and not pay anything. And so what I've been telling people is, let's make some minimum payments to keep everybody satisfied and store a little bit more than you normally would into savings. So, 20% is what everybody should be doing anyway out of it, every check, putting it away. And then, keeping your liabilities in proportion to your income. But there's a lot of people who are not in that position where they are leveraged. If you miss a paycheck, you're screwed for a little while, right? And so, as earlier I said that we're kind of putting a pause on it where you're going to be able to resume it if you keep everybody there. But I want to talk some people back off of the ledge about being afraid of that position because they knew where they were at. And I just want to, just the honesty that you're going to get have to come through on this with people who care about you is going to have to be phenomenal. There's going to have to be some great courage to be able to come to your spouse that might not have known how close to the edge they were to be completely forthcoming about it. And that's really the only way to do it. I can picture those people in my mind and how terrified they are, to be in that position in the first place. And so, like I said, that money is the easiest thing in this world to recreate. Relationships are really tough. Opportunities are really tough. The people element, once people are burned, it's really tough to get them back. But money is eternal and infinite. Okay?
Yeah.
So your predicament is not worth,
always,
not worth, lying, cheating, stealing for the sake of, tricking someone and thinking a position's different than it is. So just want to go back and, firm that up there because I know that people are scared right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, scared is the right word for that. And when people are scared, they act irrational and do things they wouldn't normally do. So for those people that are wrestling with your bills, I think just to kind of sum up what Joe's saying is make sure you make some of those minimum payments, call your bank ahead of time, do the right things, and make sure you have the 4 walls in place. If you're not familiar with that, it's a Dave Ramsey term. Make sure your house is taken care of. Make sure those basic things, you have food to eat, like you make sure you have those things in place. The rest of the stuff you're going to be able to figure out. Even if this goes on for a few months, you're still it's going on for everybody. It's not just you. And so don't feel like you're on this island. We're going to make it, and it's going to be okay.
Listen, I have rebuilt my credit like so many times. I've been to the worst credit score and the best credit score so many times in my life. So it's not going to follow you forever. Like a 1 month interruption. Like if you did something stupid for 9 months, which I did, right? More than 9 months, right? Then you got long consequences.
Right.
But these little ones, it's going to be a blip on the radar of life. It's not something that's going to follow you down. So don't be afraid of it.
It's good. It's good. So for those that maybe are sitting on a little bit extra, for those that, hey, it's a rainy day and, they have their, money in the bank. Everybody's concerned. Do I pull money out? Do I take money out of the stock market? Do I go all to bonds? Do I, I'm in an 80-20? And some people don't even know what the heck I'm talking about, and that's fine too. But what do you do on an investment thing right now? Do you buy in the stock market? I mean, it's on its way down. Some people are saying, well, wait till the S&P hits this. Some people, and I realize neither of us are necessarily technically financial advisors,
right.
But so talk to a financial advisor for technical advice, just like call your doctor before you start this weight loss program.
Right.
Same sort of deal, but hypothetically, for you personally.
Premise is things went on sale that are not very valuable right now. Like stocks are not very valuable. When people get down to it, they need things like bread and toilet paper, right?
Yeah.
Stocks are the last thing they want to buy, so they are selling it to go buy the stuff that's really valuable. So if you have all the stuff right now and you have some cash, you could buy stuff on the cheap that would otherwise, in most circumstances, be more valuable. Now, when certainty comes back, those things will return to where they were before, because technically we didn't erode value from those companies. They were still making money and they were still doing their thing. This is just situational, right? And so I don't think there's a real financial plan to this. Literally, the stock market could go to zero, right? So cheap is kind of proportional to wherever you jump in. So, but if you wanted to say, you know what, I got some extra money and you want to buy something that you feel is a little bit on the cheap, sure, but I wouldn't go crazy with it because this is really volatile still, and there's a long way to go to find out where a bottom really is.
Yeah, and most people are saying we're going to have a V-style recovery in the sense that once the coronavirus side of it is solved, so to speak, whatever that means, and life starts to go back to normal, supply chains return, that you'll start to see this bounce.
Right.
Do you think it'll bounce all the way back to where it was, or do you
even
think
further usually? Because here, think about it in my position. So I bought Tesla stock at 200, and I rode it all the way up to 700, right? And it took forever to get there. Okay. And so I sold last week, right? Tesla stock would have not come down to $200 had this not happened. So what's going to happen? Well, I get a chance to rebuy this thing towards the bottom when this thing recovers. So you got the money that was in there before, plus you got the money that would have never invested at 700, but they would invest at 250. So that's why it's going to take extra in. Because think about it, it was a good market for a really long time, which meant a lot of us were like, we're due for a correction. We're due for a correction. We're due for a
we
correction.
heard that for a while.
I was on the sideline. So
Wow. So will Tesla come under 200? You
probably.
think? Yeah.
A lot of these stocks will go. You haven't seen these
Wow.
values, and like Netflix is another one. It made me mad because I bought Netflix at $75 and I sold at $300, and I was like, yes, and then it went to like thousands of dollars. What? So I'll be able to get back in at my original score.
That's so wild. And then I think kind of maybe to round out our conversation, so we talked on jobs and optimism, and we talked on a little bit of finance. What do you think this does for the country on a political level? And I'm not necessarily talking Republican, Democrat. I know early on in this coronavirus, both sides tended to politicize the issue, but it seems like the pulse of the country right now, at least what I gather from talking to people that I know that are pretty staunch on one side or the other, they just want to come together and solve things. And I think that a silver lining in all of this terribleness that comes with this virus is maybe this pulls us together politically. What do you think?
In the short term, but 9/11, it did the same thing.
Right.
You didn't want to hear anything about politics when it came down to people. We forgot all about the real world, right? And it just came down to what was important to us. So we can unbury humanity and point out and highlight it and show that it was there the whole time. But the thing is, there's going to be one person that gets brave, and when they repoliticize it, if we the public are like, oh yeah, it's time to get political again, then the game's over and we're right back to normal. Yeah. But that will also be when things normalize. So it might get political, but that also means that things are going to get more secure at the same time. Now, would it be a challenge as leaders to kind of keep and perpetuate that as long as possible? Sure.
It's kind of nice.
It is too. I love it.
It's kind of weird to watch like bipartisan bills go through. It's kind of it's a little strange. Like we haven't seen that in how long? Right.
And I'd really like to see it, but I don't think there's any real way to get it to stop. I don't necessarily think that you can contain the sentiment and take the crisis out of it and maintain with that sentiment. I mean, you could try, but there's not enough of us optimists for that to pull that off. Or maybe there is. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a pessimist about being an optimist.
Oh, that's awesome. I would agree with that sentiment. It's interesting that crisis like this is the one thing that tends to bring people together and produce unity. It's unfortunate because if we fought like this when things were good, think of what we could do. And I think the sky's the limit. So for people out there, I know we've talked a little about fear too. People out there that are concerned for the politics of everything, concerned for the economy, they're concerned for their job, concerned for their health. What are just one or two practical things they could do every day while they're at home so they don't go stir crazy? They can kind of center themselves in and be able to, get some fresh air. What would be a couple things that you say, hey, you should do this every day? Yes, you might be quote unquote stuck in your house or, not really anywhere to go. What are some things they can do to keep that, the positive momentum in their heart and in their mind?
Well, I'm going to start with two negative things because I'll tell you, there's been more opportunities in relationships and finances that have been destroyed by boredom than anything else. You get bored and you try things that you shouldn't be just because you are bored. And guess what you're going to be over the next 3 weeks?
Bored.
A little bit bored, right? And then the second thing is that when people react to things, to crisis, to panic, and whatever. And they only make decisions when they're forced into them. There's going to be nobody over the next 3 weeks that care one way or other what you do or how you do it, right? They're not going to be looking at your homework and seeing what you're working on. It's all on you. So if we can put to bed the proactive, where you're doing it because you want to do it, and remove some of the chemicals that push you into things, that would be really good to like desensitize and do the withdrawal from all the dopamine that we get. And then when you're working on things like your finance, like what's the first thing that you pick off the list? Well, the thing that when you can look back at yourself without anybody else's prying eyes, do some criticisms and where you're weakest at, and then just start dancing on that and come to agreement with your spouse. Like, hey, when we recover, this is the first thing that we're going to do, and set some goals that are beyond this. And when you start looking beyond this crisis, and you're not bored anymore, and you see hope in the future because you're convincing yourself we're going to be okay.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, you don't want to get stuck in a permanent rut, a permanent quarantine. It's one thing to come into this season, but our eyes need to be fixed on what it's going to be like afterwards. It's really, really good. Well, if you're stuck inside, like many of us are going to be over this next little bit, we're hoping to be able to do a number of these. And if you like some of this stuff, or you have some questions or a topic you want us to hit, you could comment on these videos. We'd love to be able to jump in, and maybe we'll do a live one where we take questions or something at some point during this, since everybody's gonna be sitting around watching.
That's right.
It could be kind of fun, and we'll have a good time with it. Be safe, love your families, and we'll be praying that all goes well with your finances and business and work situations. I know everybody's in a different spot, and if you find yourself in a tough spot, know that you're gonna make it out. We really do care about you, and we want to see you through this, and we hope that this adds some value and maybe gave you a spark or an idea for something you could do. So.
All right. Have a great week. Be safe,
see you guys.
Everyone.
Yep.